it's Marie, and I'm here with something a little bit different this time. Normally, I only do unboxings on this channel, but I've created the Green Creek book tag, and I thought I would come and film it and put it on YouTube, and maybe more people would get to see it, or maybe not. We'll see. But if you're unfamiliar, the Green Creek series was written by TJ Klune. The first book, Wolf Song, has recently been re-released with this gorgeous new cover. I'm very excited. If you spent any time on the Marie Reads Books blog at all this year, you will know that I just devoured this series in April. I read all 4 novels back to back in about 2 weeks, and I'm really excited to reread this one already. I was waiting until I could get the physical copy before I did my reread, and now it's here, and I'll definitely be reading it again probably sometime in the next month or 2, but this is book 1 of the Green Creek series, of which this book tag is based. So I created the prompts so that you don't have to be familiar with the series to answer the prompts if you would like to do so. They're all very general. Let's just get into it. I'll put all the prompts down in the description, as well as, I suppose, some of my Green Creek blog posts. I think I reviewed the first book and the series, but I'll see what else I can dig up. Anyway, so prompt 1 is Wolf Song, favorite friends to romance / lovers story. And for this prompt, I've chosen Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. If you've been living under a rock and you haven't heard of Heartstopper, it has recently been turned into a Netflix series and has taken the world by storm. Everybody loves Heartstopper, apparently. And I first read these books in, I think, 2019 or 2020. I might have ordered them in 2020 at the start of the pandemic, but I can't remember. Anyway, so this is a story about Nick and Charlie, who are classmates in a British boys' school, and they're pretty different. There's no particular reason for why they should end up being friends. Charlie is quite quiet, and Nick is the rugby star of the school, but they get seated next to each other and they become friends, and over time they develop a romance, which is interesting for Nick because he's always thought that he was straight. Charlie has always known that he's gay, so it's a bit of an exploration of their relationship, but also for Nick, it's a journey towards understanding his identity. And it's just really sweet. It's such a wholesome, happy, joyful story. Even when it gets quite dark, it does touch on a lot of heavier topics, particularly towards the end of the series. Volume 4 in particular gets quite heavy, but yeah, I really recommend this series if you're looking for a wholesome friends to lovers, although I don't think they're going to be lovers in the story, but friends to romance type story. This is definitely recommended. Prompt 2 is packpackpack, favorite found family. And I love a found family. It's one of my favorite tropes, so trying to choose my favorite one was quite hard. In the end, I went with The House in the Cerulean Sea, also by TJ Klune, who wrote Wolf Song. I read this very recently, and it's another popular one, so you probably have heard of it already. It's about a man named Linus Baker, and he is a social worker for magical youth, and he gets assigned to go investigate a mysterious orphanage on a remote island in the Cerulean Sea, and there he meets Arthur Parnassus, who is the master of the house, and the group of unusually magical orphans who live there. And they're all special and strange in their own way, but Linus grows attached to the children and to Arthur and to their house, and sort of they challenge his worldview and his understanding of himself. And it's just a very sweet story of how he finds this family that he's been lacking and didn't know he was looking for. So it's a very, very nice story. I love this one. Prompt 3 is Raven Song, favorite second chance romance. Now, I don't read a lot of second chance romances. I don't know why. I just don't. But probably the one that came to mind first was Persuasion by Jane Austen. I don't have the individual book of Persuasion, but I do have this massive collection of Jane Austen books, which I can show you. It's got gold pages. It is very heavy though, so I won't hold it up. But Persuasion is the story of Anne Elliot, who is sort of an old maid. She's, I think, 27, and she's unmarried, but she was at one point engaged to a Captain Wentworth. He wasn't a captain at the time, but he is now. And she was persuaded not to go through with his engagement by her family. And so several years pass, and he comes back into town, and he is interested in marrying someone. He sets his sights on one of Anne's friends, and she is she's just a lovely character. She's very calm and selfless and giving, and so she tries to help them towards marriage. But of course, as things progress, they take turns, and it's a story about how Anne and Wentworth find their way back to each other. And it possibly has the most famous literary love letter in history in it. It's a beautiful story. Don't watch the Netflix adaptation with Dakota Johnson. Please don't. It's terrible. Just read the book. You won't regret it. Prompt 4 is Green Creek, favorite setting or location. This one was also hard for me. I don't know why all these prompts were hard for me when I wrote the prompts, but they were. I don't really remember locations or settings very often. I don't know why, I just don't. But for this prompt, I've chosen Via from C.S. Pacat's Captive Prince series. Via is one of the two main locations that we venture through in the series, the other one being Icolos. But they're very different. So Icolos is very minimalistic, very Greek inspired, whereas Via is more, I suppose it's French inspired, but it's very manipulative and complex. It's very layered. Everything about Via is over the top, and I don't know, there's something about it that I really enjoy. I like the complexity of the social structure and the way that's reflected in the characters who are from there. I suppose when I think of a location or a setting that I've really enjoyed and would want to spend more time in, I often think of Via from Captive Prince. Prompt 5 is Elizabeth, favorite family matriarch. Now, this was probably the hardest prompt that I had to answer, because if I can't remember settings, then I can remember matriarchs even less. But I did remember Essen from the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. This is a great series. It's very hard to explain. It's basically a apocalyptic science fiction fantasy series about a world that undergoes a volcanic eruption, and everything sort of dies. And all the communities become very self-serving, I suppose, because they're all trying to survive for, they don't even know how long, because they don't know how long the ash and the fallout is going to linger. But Essun is on a personal mission. At the start of the book, she experiences a family tragedy, and her husband takes their daughter and is taking her off to some unknown location. So Essun has to try and track them down and get her daughter back. And she is very single-minded. She is very hardened, but in a way that is believable and not unlikable. So I think if I had to choose a character who embodied that sort of family matriarch vibe, it would be Essun from 5th season. Prompt 6 is Tether. A favourite bond between two characters can be romantic or platonic. I'll leave it up to you. But for me, there could be no other pairing besides Fitz and the Fool from Robin Hobb's Elderlings series. This is book 1, Assassin's Apprentice. I have the fancy illustrated edition. And this is a series about Prince Fitzchivalry Farseer, who is the illegitimate son of the former heir of this country. And he arrives at Buckkeep when he's 5 or 6, and the series follows him throughout the course of his life. Over the course of his life, he meets another character who is named the Fool, and he is the court jester, basically. And they form an unlikely friendship that sort of defines them, really defines their lives. They are completely devoted to each other, even though Fitz in particular does form other bonds with other characters. It's really the Fool and their relationship that is at the heart of the series and that his life revolves around. And I just love that. The Fool is one of my absolute favourite characters of all time. And I think my favourite part of the series as a whole is just getting to follow them as they age together and as they undergo so many trials and tribulations but keep coming back to each other. So I couldn't pick anyone but them. Prompt 7 is Gordo's favourite friendship group, and there were a few that I could have picked for this one, but I've chosen Carry On by Rainbow Rowell and the friendship group they're in. So Carry On and the other 2 books that follow, it's a series of 3. It follows primarily a boy named Simon, who is sort of the chosen one, but it's a bit more complicated than that. He's the chosen one, but he's not always very good at it, for reasons that become clear. But he is joined on his quest by his friend Penny, his ex-girlfriend Agatha, and his arch nemesis Baz, who is also his roommate and his love interest. So it's a complex relationship, but they have to put aside their various differences, and there are many, and sort of figure out how to work together to solve the problem of the insidious humdrum, who is an unknown evil magical entity that is basically killing parts of magical land throughout the UK. And yeah, I don't know, there's something about the way they all have various links to each other and get along, but there's a tension to their friendship that pulls in various directions, and it progresses over the course of the series. So I guess I don't know that I would say the Carry On group is my favorite friendship group that I've ever read, but it is definitely one that I think about and enjoy reading and coming back to. So it seemed like a good idea. Prompt 8 is Livingstone, favorite villain. Now, this was another hard one because I was looking at my shelves, and although I read a lot of fantasy, there weren't many villains that really stuck out to me as villains that I enjoy. Like, there are some that I absolutely hate just as characters, and that's intentional, but there's something more interesting to me about villains that you love to hate and can understand their villainy. So it was a hard prompt for me to answer, but I've chosen The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. And this is a very confronting book. It's about it's hard to explain. Great cities around the world have avatars, who are people that embody the cities that they represent. So The City We Became is set in New York, and there are, I think, 5 avatars for the different boroughs. There's one for Manhattan, one for the Bronx, one for Brooklyn, and some others. I can't remember. It's been a few years since I read it. But the villain in this series is a strange entity called the White. And it's a difficult read as a white person, which I am, because it's so unapologetically angry, and it's written there's no subtlety to it at all, and that's intentional. It's very obviously about the anger of a black person, which N.K. Jemisin is, in response to whiteness, and the actions that white people have taken against people of color and black people in particular in the US. So it's confronting, and I struggled to read it the first time I did, although, to be fair, I also tried to read it very early during the pandemic, so I wasn't in the greatest mental headspace, and also at the time when the Black Lives Matter protests were sort of really finding their feet and really gearing up. So there was a lot going on, and I had to put the book down. But when I came back to it several months later, I found it a much easier reading experience, although I think that was just my mental state having calmed at that point. But it's not an easy read, and I would encourage you to read it anyway, because it's definitely worth the discomfort and the anger that it brings about. So that's why I chose this book for favourite villain, because although the villain is not as, I guess, personable in that way that villains can be, the way it villainizes whiteness in a way that is understandable if you're willing to let yourself understand it is, I think, represented in a particularly masterful way. So definitely check this book out if you're looking for something to challenge you. Prompt 9 is Brother Song, favorite sibling, group, or duo. And, looking at my shelves, I realized that I don't have many books with siblings in them, or at least not in a way that's centralized. Obviously, a lot of characters have siblings, but they don't often form a huge part of the narrative. So for this one, I've chosen Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, which features the famous Bennet sisters, of which there are 5: Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia. And they're all very different. They all have their own personalities and characteristics. Jane is the beautiful one, Lizzie is the smart one, Mary is the pious one, Kitty is the forgotten one, and Lydia is the spoiled one, who's always trying to get attention, mostly from men. And they're, I mean, it's just funny the way they all interact with each other. And there are a lot of books that have been written, particularly about some of the other sisters, Mary and Kitty in particular, because they're, I guess, the ones who are not talked about as much, or in some ways the more interesting for their lack of focus in this main novel. But the Bennet sisters are pretty iconic as a sibling group. They're always having a go at each other, but I think at the end of the day they all try to support each other where they can. Lydia maybe less so, but she is young. So, and the final prompt is prompt 10, Full Moon. Favorite character of any supernatural species. These could be vampires, werewolves, fae, warlocks, witches, anything you can think of. But I would encourage you to choose a supernatural group and find your favorite character, or at least a character that you love from within that group. So I love a number of supernatural creatures. I love warlocks, I love fae, I love vampires. Pretty much werewolves are the only ones that I don't love, which is ironic because this whole tag was inspired by a book about werewolves, but there's an exception. One of my favourite supernatural creatures, in fact probably my first favourite supernatural creature, was the vampire. I don't know why, I just really like vampires and all the things that they symbolise. So I have chosen Silver Under Nightfall by Rinch Pecco. This is the book that I'm currently reading at the time that I'm filming this, and I am making a lot of fast progress. I have fallen in love with this book, and in particular the 2 vampires who are 2 of the main characters. So that's Zidan Malik and Sung Xiao Dan. They are the Lord of the 3rd Court of Vampires and the heiress to the 4th Court of Vampires, respectively. And they come to this country of Illyria and are trying to forge a peace between the vampires and the humans. While they're there, they meet a vampire hunter named Remy, and he has a bit of a complex backstory. There's a widespread belief that his father is not actually his father, that he was in fact fathered by a vampire. So he's mistrusted even though he's one of the vampire hunters. And he is trying to find out information about the 1st Court of Vampires because they are the ones that were responsible for his mother's death. And he sort of gets drawn into this investigation that Zidan and Xiao Dan are conducting into a interesting new infection called the Rot, which is taking hold of a lot of the vampires and creating these super strong, almost impossible to kill demonic creatures. So they're trying to figure out where it's come from and how to stop it and how to cure it if they can. And they sort of bring Remy along to help them. And along the way, he becomes drawn to them and their relationship. So it is a male, female romance, if that's something you're interested in. I certainly am. I really like the vampires in this book. I don't know why exactly. I think there's something, they're not over the top in a way that I find a lot of vampires and a lot of vampire stories can be. The Zidane and Zhaodan are very understated in a lot of ways. Zidane is very, not withdrawn, but he's reserved. He's also got medical training, which is great to see. And he's a scientist. And Zhaodan is just, she's very perky in a way that often irritates me in characters, but for some reason she doesn't. And I can't figure out why. Maybe it's because she's balanced really well with Zidane and Remy, who is also a bit more withdrawn, but he's much more angry in that withdrawal. So, I don't know, there's something about the way all three of them work together that make them very appealing to read about, at least to me. Obviously, opinions are subjective, but this is a vampire novel that I'm really loving, and I love the vampires in it. So I'm eager to finish this book. I've got less than 200 pages to go, so maybe I should finish filming this and get back to that. But that is the Green Creek book tag, which again I created. As I said at the beginning, all the prompts will be below in the description. I would love to see other people answer these questions. If you do, tag me, either here on YouTube or on Instagram at mariereads_books. Thank you for joining me. I'll be back again soon with another unboxing. I've got a box on the way. But until then, I hope you're having a great day wherever you are, and I'll see you next time. Bye!